What's going on? What's going on, YouTube? It's your boy, Dr. Code, back at you with another live video. Okay, I'm trying to be as professional as I can. Before we get anything started, I want to make sure that that D Derell is actually going to be here. So I don't want to like go deep into the topic without Derell being here. Hold on, let me turn down this device. Okay. Yeah. So if you guys could please hit that like button on your way in. Everybody and their grandmama's going live right now. That's why I thought this would be the perfect time to go live. Um, because topics like this, you really want the information. It's really all about the information. And I don't want the information to get lost through a bunch of screaming, hollering, you know what I mean? Like I really want to sit down and have a conversation uh with D Durrell. So I did reach out to him and I asked him, hey man, can we do this show? And he said, why not? Let's do it. So we are going to be discussing, as soon as he gets here, we're going to be discussing trauma in YouTube, the problem of oversharing. Now, some of you guys are going to be like, yo, I get it. I understand why you're doing this because you can relate. Come get your, oh boy. Oh man. Oh boy. Nah, I mean, he can hang out. I think he has a show he's supposed to be doing right now, anyways. Identity, what are you talking about, bro? You out of here? You out of here? All right, he is here. Derell, the link is where we were chatting. That's where the link is. Go ahead and hit that this way. I don't have to tell others, you know what I mean, to not hit the link. But if you can't find it or if it's not working, then I'll drop the link. Identity, stop, bro. This is gonna be a fire show, man. You get over here hating, bro. Why you over here hating? This is gonna be a fire show. All right, gotta make sure. Yeah, this is gonna be a fire show. I already know it. I already know it's gonna be a fire show. All right. Thank you guys for coming on in. Thank you for coming on in. Y'all see it's Dr. Code up here. So y'all know it's no games. It's no games today. It's Dr. Code up here. And we're waiting on D Derell to come on and hit that link. If you need me to drop the link, let me know. I just don't want to. I don't want anybody to be tempted because that's what happens. People get tempted and they start hitting the link, especially when the conversation starts getting real good. You already know how that goes, D Derell. The conversation starts to get real good, and they just want to hit that damn link. So yeah. So while we wait for D Derell, I am going to load up my slides, my banners, because yes, this has banners. And then we will get into it. Hold on, let me see. See what we got going. All right. All right, who's here? Yvonne is here. Look, this is just a breath of fresh air, I hope. I love the effery just as much as the next man, but every once in a while, you got to have a great discussion. You know what I mean? You got to have a great discussion. And I thought there's no better person to have it with than D Derell. So, Jackie Chambers is here. Identity's hating ass is here. Angie's here. Angie is here. D Derell says he's here. We're just waiting for him to find that link. It might not work. I don't know. I've never dropped a link in this particular location before, ever. What happened is here. Good to see you, superstar. Good to see you. Unadulterated Truth is here. Unadulterated Truth is all about good conversation. This man likes to have good conversation, and so do I. All right, you can't find the link? I got you, bro. I got you. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link and then probably erase it as soon as you get up here. Moderators, remove the link as soon as D Derell, if you can do that. If you can remove the link as soon as he hits the link. There we go. There you go, big dog. Uh-oh, you broke out the specs and suspenders for the... Oh, yeah. You already know. You got Dr. Code on the panel right now. It's Dr. Code on the panel. And Binary's disregarding of identity and star finding new fame has been the most unexpected twist. I did not disregard my peeps. They know what it is. They know what it is. It's Code Fam for life. All right, D Derell is here. The man, the myth, the legend is here. What's up, big dog?
How you doing, brother? What's going on? Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. Thank you for accepting the invitation, bro. I
Oh,
really do
no problem,
appreciate
no
it.
problem. By all
Yeah.
means, man. I love talking about mental health related topics, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely looking forward to providing some level of understanding psychoeducation as it
Yep.
involves mental health as it relates to trauma and whatever other
Woo.
topics that come along with that.
Man, just your intro's fire, bro. God, dog. Let me play a little intro I made for us. It's nothing special. It's not on no Bombay level. It's real generic, but I think you'll
Okay.
like it. Here we go. This is for B Code and D Derell. Here we go.
Heard I say, hey, that you gain when loyalty is returned.
All right, all right.
All
I don't
right.
know if you recognize those cities, but I just threw
Sure.
those cities in there, man. I had to. I had to. Yeah.
No
So we.
problem.
Yeah. So we're gonna be talking about trauma in YouTube, and I did a little parentheses there. I don't know if you caught it, but it said the problem of oversharing. And in
Yes.
the yeah, and the reason I wanted to put that in there is because I need to learn some stuff from you. Because
Okay.
you know me, that's an issue I have, brother. I overshare my ass off and I need to cut that shit out. You know what I mean? Because now it's coming back to bite me. You know what I mean? So
Right. Right.
yeah, so I had to add that in there and maybe get some advice from you, man, on what I need to do.
Okay.
Now, I'm curious, like in your field. Well, let me break it down. Trauma dumping is really what I want to kind of focus on. Like when people get on YouTube, they get on social media platforms, and they just spew all their stuff up there. You know, it's when they unload all their emotional crap onto one or maybe two of their friends, but now it's
Right.
spread all across the internet. So that's like trauma dumping. Do
Right.
you have that in your field? Is there such a thing as like oversharing, trauma dumping, and you have to kind of combat that in your field a little bit?
Well, what do we basically when we look at trauma dumping,
Hmm.
um, as it involves as far as the term itself, it's pretty much a person who feels a need to express themselves in a certain way that they don't feel comfortable with expressing to people that they know that are dear to them.
Mm,
Actually, it's filled in a sense on which it's a response to not feeling comfortable with expressing yourselves to people you know because you're unwilling to deal with the criticism or the unwanted response that one may elicit back to you in that process.
yeah.
So, in many particular situations that involve a person disclosing that information, and a therapist or a mental health professional is usually the last one that anybody would consider. I was just reading a
Mm,
article just the other day with the Texas Counseling Association, and it talked about particularly for people who are young adults and even adolescents who suffer from mental illness, they're more willing to discuss those issues with friends, a stranger, or anyone else before they would discuss that with a mental health professional like myself.
oh
So,
wow.
and so when we talk about trauma dumping in itself, a person is pretty much at a point in which, from a psychological standpoint, they have an inability to cope with what they're dealing with. They want to express it. They don't know who to express it to, how to release it, and so they feel comfortable with in some way the anonymous texture of
The
being
internet.
on
Hmm.
YouTube where
Yep.
people you don't really know people and you have indirect or I would say parasocial relationships and so on
Hmm.
that are not necessarily directly connected. One feels more comfortable to just release that on a medium on a social media platform as opposed to direct traditional contact with someone that is familiar with them. So the unfamiliarity of a platform can actually, in this day and time,
Hmm.
as we evolve as a culture, it allows people to have the willingness to express things that they would not tell the people who they actually know.
And that is so wild because I fell into that. And it feels like it's a trap. So whoever built this social media platform construct, whoever built this, they had to go into it with the psychology that this would happen to people. You know what I mean? Because it seems like it's easier to happen to people because you feel like it's a one-on-one thing, but at the end of the day, you could be talking to thousands of people and not even realize it.
Exactly. And so the problem with trauma dumping or oversharing, as you may say, is
Hmm.
that the person who who feels that it's okay for them to give this information, they're not understanding the audience that they're actually verbalizing this to.
Mhm.
And do you mind if I use you as an example?
Yeah, yes,
Before
of course,
I,
yes.
okay.
That's why I got you here, because you know. Mhm.
Particularly in your situation, and I had this discussion today with another professional, is that in your instance, which to me could actually make a good case study, in the
Mhm.
fact that you took a situation that happened years ago, and that occurred, and regardless of how truthful or not truthful that situation is, when you disclose that sensitive information, you are not necessarily cognizant of those who may have experienced something similar to that,
Right.
or they known somebody who was who was in some way, shape, or form on either side of that type of particular situation. And therefore, when you enter into this to spaces and you divulge that information, you don't understand the potential psychological trigger that can come from those who hear something, particularly with the sensitivity of how it happened, and they can perceive that in somewhat of a, could be potentially logical, or it can also be illogical.
Yeah.
And in so many situations, they can in some way develop some level of personification of the fact that they went through something similar.
Mhm.
Therefore, if particularly if they haven't sought the proper therapy to heal from what they went through, they can in someone internalize that within themselves because of the unrealized, the unhealed trauma that they experienced, and they can use your particular event as a way of fighting back in a situation that they were unable to do so. Now,
Wow. Yeah.
I also want to preface with that being said that the generalization that I just clearly stated is not necessarily relatable to everybody that heard that may have had a similar experience. But what
Mhm.
I'm saying is that there is a risk factor that takes place, that potentially there are people who may have engaged in that particular um, behavior, and they responded to you based on their inability to seek help or learn how to cope with their own trauma that may have been somewhat similar, or in some ways, and I would say somewhat similar in a variety of ways to
Mhm.
what you had expressed.
Yeah, yeah, and that's facts. And I've read up a little bit on this. You know, I reached out to you and I was like, okay, we're doing a show. I got to read up on it. And there's a Forbes article that talks about oversharing and trauma and social media and stuff like that. And what you're talking about is kind of similar to something they call, and we're going to get into it a little bit later, but they call it the privacy calculus effect. It's like, okay, it's like doing the math. I'm going to share this. What are the risk and the rewards? And sometimes the risks are so much greater than the rewards, but
Reward.
because you want to just spew this stuff out, you don't even care. You'd rather just risk it. You know what I mean? And I felt like that's where I was for such a long time. Now, I will tell you this, when I first got on YouTube, I was in a very, and I think you know this, but I was in a very dark place in my life when I first
Right.
got on
You
YouTube.
did say that.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so when I went on YouTube, I went to YouTube to aggravate people, almost to match that energy. And it's a
Okay.
horrible thing to do, but I did that. So I think my oversharing and everything that I did was a lack of understanding of the potential consequences, really, or like this privacy calculus effect. I said I'm gonna bet on myself, even though the odds are against me. I'm gonna bet on myself, and I sure did lose that bet. But we're gonna get into that. I want to show. I'm not gonna show a video, but I just want people to see when we're talking about something, like we are talking about um, trauma dumping, right? So that's
Okay.
that's what we're starting out with. We're starting out with trauma dumping, and we said that trauma dumping is a real thing. It's when people unload all their emotional crap onto one or more of their friends, but nowadays this is spread across the internet. Now, my situation isn't necessarily a trauma. That particular situation isn't necessarily a trauma dumping. It's more of a oversharing. We have some people in the sector that we're trying to move into that really do overshare. I don't know if you heard the video this morning that I played, but did you hear it or?
No, I didn't hear the video
Okay.
that you played.
Yeah. Well, they are comfortable. Well, this one lady, she's comfortable of people talking about her being SA'd and having a child from that. And now that is being somewhat weaponized against her. And you see what I
So
mean about the
so
trauma
so
and
so
the go ahead.
so you're telling me because she is comfortable with talking about being SA and having a child from it, there are people weaponizing something that she potentially healed from and have moved past, and now they're trying to weaponize that against her. Is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Yes.
Okay, so you see that, and so when you talked about I guess the information calculus or whatever that
Mhm.
particular
Mhm.
term
Yeah.
is,
Mhm.
um, I think that particular um, example basically is one of the reasons why I wholeheartedly talk about not sharing things,
Mhm.
because you also got to understand
And
the
you told me that,
demographic.
Derell. You told me that. You told me,
I
man,
told
you
you
gotta
that.
yeah.
I've told
Mhm.
multiple people that throughout the sector for years, and I'm talking about for those before I even created the Umar sector, as far as people that came on my channel from both sides that would
Mhm.
share things on my original D Darrell channel um, about saying personal things, because you're not understanding the audience that you're speaking to is an audience that is very diverse.
Yep.
There is a high level of people who have some level of mental health distress, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, who are
Mhm.
hearing these things, and they don't necessarily process that as appropriate. That particular situation, I would say, if it was to occur in a normal traditional aggregate of our society or whatever community they're in,
Mhm.
that probably would have not been the response. But because that is a social media platform where you
Oh
have
my
people from all
goodness.
over the country, and they
Right.
see and view you as a content creator first and not necessarily a person, so then
Wow.
they internalize that and then they use to weaponize it against not the person but the content creator. And
Wow.
unfortunately, that is a tool that is used for entertainment purposes and etc.
Oh
on
my
YouTube.
God. Well, thank you so much for breaking that down, man. That makes perfect sense, and you're absolutely right. They are aiming at the content creator first and not the person. You know, they
Exactly.
and I think that they actually remove themselves from that too. So like we stop becoming a person when we start aiming that vitriol at others. You know what I mean? Because we
Exactly.
deem ourselves as content creators. You know how I was talking about I think that the architects of the internet and social media platforms, how I think that they knew that this was going to happen eventually. I want to tell you a little story, and it's not oversharing, but I want to tell you a little story about this student. Okay, she's a student, and she came up to me one day, and she was crying her eyes out. And I was like, "Yo, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And she said there's a TikTok account of hers when she was like 9 or 10 or like 8 or 9 or something like that. And she doesn't have the password and she doesn't have the username. And now she's like 13, you know, about to go to high school, and all the middle schoolers, they found the page. She can't get rid of it. She can't, and she was being silly, being dumb, you know what I mean? And now like tons of bullying is happening. What
Okay.
like if someone came to you and wanted to talk to you about that type of situation, like what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, as a therapist, we don't necessarily give advice, but we would
Oh,
definitely
okay.
process and assist that particular person as it involves that whole process, as far as what led them to partake in that activity, and to
Mhm.
make proper decisions as far as how to move forward and to minimize whatever distress and handle the conflict or the adversarial interactions that one may encounter within the school environment. And
Mm.
so, in that particular situation, in which I have had similar
Mhm.
situations with clients that were at the middle school and high school, where
Mhm.
they got in trouble. Some of these things were also teacher related, as it involved
Oh, wow.
social media platforms, and how the posting of pictures, the post of different things that was found out, and it causes one to be criticized and ostracized within that community itself.
Mhm.
And so, in many situations like that, um, I first of all want to assess the emotional range that person has right now in response to what is occurring to them as far as what the bullying, how they're responding to the bullying.
Right.
Are they crying? Are they acting out in anger? Are they fearful? Are they having an inability to eat, concentrate on their
Mm.
coursework, their socialization? Do they have any friends that are do everybody are they isolated? So we want to first assess everything around that response that's
Mhm.
given, and then I would focus on in turn how they're communicating their feelings or how they're trying to interact with those, and as it involves what was done. Okay.
Mm.
Now, in many situations, particularly if they're kids, I would definitely recommend some level of family counseling to kind of make the parents aware of what is going on, because
Right.
basically for children, the parents do have to consent to them receiving therapy. So with that being said, I think that it is definitely in that situation appropriate that parents, along with the student and the faculty, administration, or school board system, be involved with what had occurred and how we can go about reprimanding or punishing or doing things to
Mhm.
those who are using that against her. And they follow basically school policy and procedure as that involves bullying and things of
Bullying,
that
yeah.
sort, which is
Mhm.
against the rules. And so a lot of particular times in this, as though, and I understand they have been a lot of money in the last 15, 20 years as it involves bullying, anti-bullying campaigns and
Mhm.
rhetoric. But unfortunately, contracting with various school districts, there still is a level of apathy that does occur,
Mm.
or a lack of ineffectiveness in alleviating those type of behaviors. So from my position, I'm attempting to hold those kids who are treating her in that manner, or he or she in that manner. We're going to make them accountable through the rules of the
Yeah.
school, and things of that sort. And if all else fails, as it involves that person managing their emotions, because we're about managing in that environment,
Mhm.
because that environment in itself, it's traumatic in itself, because it's a bad experience that elicits a certain response because of that. It was a
Wow.
poor decision. It wasn't the best decision. But
Right.
just because you make a poor decision doesn't mean that that gives other people the license to victimize you because of that. And unfortunately, we're dealing with children, and children have a certain level of maturity or lack of maturity. And so, with that being said, we have to look at all phases of how this is affecting this person's mental health, how it's
Mhm.
affecting their psychology, as far as learning and socializing and things of that sort, and also as far as the interactiveness of inability to create new friends, develop new friendships or associates and things of that sort, because that all makes up the school experience for the child. So we
Yeah.
want to put that particular person in an environment that allows them to thrive and learn, regardless of what mistake that they made. So I'm holding all aspects of the school environment, the school administration,
Mhm.
accountable, and we
Accountable,
can
yeah.
to be able to come into meetings, and we come up with a plan of action. And if that plan of action fails, and in some situations that I was involved in, if the school failed to accommodate or to correct this, then we have to
Mhm.
look at maybe placing that child in another school environment, or maybe potentially homeschool, or some other type of educational
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. Man, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, there's probably a lot of people that are going to hear this, and their child, or maybe even the kid might be hearing this and be like, dang, that's some great information. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
No
I want to
problem.
talk about, because we are talking about trauma dumping. I want to talk about venting versus trauma dumping, because
Okay.
there is a difference, right?
Yes, it is a
So
difference.
so venting is something done with the permission of the listener. So you don't just go to somebody and be like, "Hey, hey, I gotta vent." "Hey, is it all right if I vent?" So there's a permission. When you vent in order to release like frustration, disappointment, or anger. However, we talked about trauma dumping, and trauma dumping is when somebody just overshares and doesn't take personal responsibility or show any self reflection. They're just kind of word vomiting everything all over the place just to try to
Okay.
get a temporary relief. You want to talk about the difference between venting and trauma dumping in your mind,
Okay.
in your eyes? Yeah.
Sure. So when we're talking about venting, which is something that I allow people to do within the therapeutic process, within the therapeutic milieu, as far as them receiving particularly when someone just recently encountered some level of adverse interaction, some unwanted um, stimuli that occurred to them, or whatever that occurred, where it creates some level of discomfort. Usually,
Mhm.
when I facilitate and allow someone to vent and to express oneself, um, it's done in I would say, in a process that allows them to be cognizant of what they're saying, how they're
Mm.
saying it, what they're feeling. So we're just not venting for the sake of venting. We're
Yep.
venting in a way in which we can alleviate this and we can get these things out. So how do we prevent this? How do we cope with this? How do we move on from it? Is there any type of corrective intervention that can occur so that when a similar situation occurs, we can learn to deal with it? And unfortunately, one of the biggest, contributors to someone wanting to vent is that they repress those, or I'm not going to say repress, they suppress
Mhm.
those thoughts and feelings over time. And unfortunately, when it builds up and build up, they are going to ask, like you said, permission from someone, particularly someone that they trust, care for, they hold in high regard, to release that information.
Right.
Venting can be utilized in the therapeutic process in an effective manner to allow someone to express oneself. Trauma bonding, I'm sorry, not trauma bonding, but trauma dumping is not
Mhm.
necessarily utilized in a therapeutic process or
Mhm.
within traditional therapy, because the person itself is actually using a platform, or they're allowing themselves to be exposed to others that, with the understanding that they never considered, or
Mm.
you are considered the use of a
The
professional in the
yeah.
process.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you with that, and it just seems like a violation of somebody's space too when you're doing the trauma dumping on them. Can we talk about the psychology of a person that is like always negative? I'm pretty sure you've
Okay.
ran into people like this before. I
Okay.
mean, every time you try to hang out with them, they got something negative to say. Every time they call you, they got something negative to say. Now, every once in a while they'll be positive, and that's why you're their friend. But what is the psychology? I know it has to be a general statement, but I know everybody has had that person like, man, I don't even want to call her or him because every time I call him, there's just something negative going on. What do you think can attribute to some of that kind of stuff?
Okay. So when we look at negative thinking, and
Hmm.
as I look at it from a clinical standpoint,
Hmm.
one of the key features of someone who is negative all the time, there's a high risk for clinical depression. And
Mm.
when you can assess the term major depressive disorder, which is a mood disorder that's in the DSM,
Hmm.
one of the key things is that people in turn engage in repetitive negative thinking that can in some way show itself verbally or through behaviors. Now, I'm not saying a person that does that, because that's only one feature. But
Right.
when I hear that, I look in the direction of a potential mood related issue, whether it's major depression or something else. But uh, just 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 kind of vaguely thinking of it, when someone
Hmm.
repetitively does this all the time, it is actually probably, in most cases, a symptom of another in-depth situation that is causing psychological discomfort or inability to cope, which is basically what depression is. The depression is
Wow.
merely the inability to cope with a person, situation, idea, or some level of function or trauma that occurred to you. So when someone is repetitively being negative,
Hmm.
which it also can be linked to somewhat of a cognitive distortion as far as how they see and how they review and perceive things in a manner that may not necessarily
Be
be
reality, like
positive,
you
but
said.
it may
Yeah.
not
Hmm.
also be rational.
Hmm.
So, as a clinician, when someone tells me that they constantly think of negative thoughts, they're repetitious, when they talk to people, they go places that are negative, 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 there's usually in turn some isolated event that they're not able to identify, or they're not able to confront. And so
Mm.
my job as a therapist is to provide a basis for that person to express the negative thoughts that they had, but connected to what triggers that, what thoughts are an experience. And many of those situations could be child related or some
Mm-hmm.
isolated event that they have that is unresolved. And so, being that they have not been able to, um, I would say, um, heal from it or process it, it can
Mm-hmm.
come out in a negative manner because they're always assuming the negative.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
always consuming that something. You're always presuming that in any situation, a negative outcome
Yep.
will happen, irrespective of potentially a positive outcome can equally occur. And
Mm-hmm.
so that there's a little bit of a a mental imbalance as it involves, something bad or good could happen, but they lean
Right.
more towards
Towards the
the
bad.
negative
Mm-hmm.
all the time. But in
Yep.
most cases, from my over 20 years experience in mental health, is usually related to another isolated event that has been unresolved.
All right. Now, this is going to be one of those shows that we're not going to be up here too long. I would say an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depending
That's
on the
great.
conversation,
That's great.
because we don't want to. We want to just give the information out there. You know what I mean?
Sure, sure.
And Derell, I've always loved doing this, like these type of shows with you. We've done this before,
Yeah, we have. We
and then
have.
we get into our little messes or whatever. Having fun on YouTube. But
No
I
problem.
think I think now, like the platforms that we're on now, I think this is much needed, and I would like to do this more often. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If a topic comes up, I would love to just invite you and make this like not a regular thing, but just a more often thing. That's why I made an
Yeah,
intro for us.
I'm open to that. I'm open to
Okay.
that.
Okay, so I want to get into oversharing because this is what really, really happens on this platform. A lot of people overshare. We know people that have been in prison. We know people that have been, I mean, just through the ringer. We know about my story. We know all kinds of stuff because people overshare. So oversharing refers to disclosing an excessive or inappropriate amount of personal information, especially in the context where such information is unexpected or unwarranted. That's what happened to me. It was unexpected, unwarranted, but I still opened my big mouth and started talking. So, so
Okay.
this this occurs both online and offline. We know that, often creating discomfort or awkwardness for those that are receiving the information, and sometimes there's heavy regret for the one who overshares. So this is really why I wanted to bring you up here, because I find myself in this situation. You want to speak a little
Okay.
bit about oversharing?
So, it's very interesting that you're bringing these topics up because particularly in the infant stages of my channel, and particularly in going live stream within this sector, there were tons of people who overshared, and one person is someone that's quite dear to you that actually overshared
Yeah,
in our initial meeting of each other, and that person particularly overshared her relationships and things of that sort. And so when someone overshares, in many instances, a person that overshares, the reason why they're oversharing is because they never found an outlet to actually express their feelings about the
mm,
actual issue.
mhm.
So when someone is subject to that behavior, it probably is a result of not being able to truly express that. And I want people to
Wow.
understand this, and I'm going to kind of talk about a few things that you can do to prevent yourself from oversharing. And I
Okay.
think that you have to find valuable, productive outlets in which you can verbalize whatever you're thinking and feeling without necessarily feeling like you have to, divulge that information to others because
Right.
you just want to. And to me, it's not like trying. It's just that you're giving out more information that is needed.
Mm-hmm.
So in many cases, particularly in a therapeutic environment, I encourage people to journal write. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also encourage people, and I facilitate through behavioral exercises, positive self talk.
Yeah.
Okay, that in
Yeah.
which you're using self talk to oneself about these things, and you're able to release those things. Also, I would encourage people to use art, particularly with children and
That's
kids,
awesome.
to
Yep.
express themselves if they can't do it verbally and they can't do it in a manner that they see fit. You can express those feelings of whatever that event is through art. Okay,
Yeah.
you can express that. Those are some of the few things that you can do. Or in or what you can do is as the last resort or just another option, you can express yourself with someone that you trust, that
Mm-hmm.
you know will hold your confidence, and you can share that information. But oversharing particularly is highly related to the people that you're sharing it with, because the people
Mm-hmm.
that you're typically sharing it with, all of this information, they don't really know you.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
really connected to you. And so it is no need, for me particularly, if you are oversharing a relationship that you had for 20 years and you're talking about all types of intimate details that a
Right.
person that you really don't know personally should know. But if it was someone that you have been friends with, you know, and you can actually reach out and touch, and they can also touch
Mm-hmm.
you, and
Mm-hmm.
they can also eat. And then also we have to look at the reciprocity of a person that you tell that to, also telling you similar things also. And so
That's true.
you can't get that. And so when you're looking at the parasocial relationships and the dynamic of that with content creators, subscribers among some subscribers, and etc.
Mm-hmm.
um Oversharing comes from the fact that the people who you're telling this to are not necessarily expecting you to give that information, and they don't even
Right.
feel that they are actually, they don't think that they're worthy of receiving some of this information. Like, I really don't want to know that you engaged
Right.
in this type of sexual act. I
Yeah.
don't really want to
Mm-hmm.
know that
That's true.
that you had this partner or that partner, and you engaged in some type of negative activity. And we're not judging, but the fact of the matter, based on the level in the context of the relationship that we have, which can
Mm-hmm.
also be very superficial, and not
Mm.
necessarily because of because of the platform itself and the indirectness of the communication and the person that you're seeing, particularly under the disguise of a content creator,
Yep.
not person. And I'm saying that to distinguish the two, because even though people understand that you are a person, you're talking about, as a content creator, your personal life.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and it's hard for the viewer to departmentalize the two,
Mm-hmm.
because the person who's the content creator may not be representative of who you are in real life, but
Right.
it can cause gray areas. And though, yes, oversharing occurs because you're giving that information to people, and particularly in that relationship does not necessarily constitute, um doesn't necessarily constitute, I think, a a bond that is worthy of that level of
I hear
information.
you. I hear you. I hear you big time.
Mhm.
And I've been on record of saying, one of the greatest things that I've ever done in my life was see a therapist. But it took me forever to see a therapist. You know what I mean?
It's
I don't know
typical.
what it is. Yeah, I don't know what it is about men in the black community, but it takes us forever
It
to go
does.
get right. You know what I mean?
It
And
does.
I want you to touch on this a little bit, because one thing that stuck with me that my therapist actually told me was, all right, when you fall into depression, Dr. Code, when you fall into depression, that means you are looking into your past and you're looking into all of those things in, because I shared with him, so of course he
Right.
can diagnose that. And then he said, when you get anxious and you get all that high anxiety, that means you're more focused on your goals in the future and things like that. And then the most beautiful thing he told me was, you have to remember there's a present. There's a present moment. You can't live in the past. That
Right.
leads to depression. You can't live in the future. That leads to anxiety. You have to understand your reality. So when he told me that, it really stuck with me, and I would love to get your thoughts on that assessment. I know it's very vague and general because I'm
Yeah.
learning not to overshare, but go ahead.
So basically, me as a clinician hearing that, um, his approach to me is more of what we call the here and now,
Mm,
and which is focusing on, you're not necessarily focusing on the past.
mhm,
A lot of past events is more psycho, analytical or dynamic in turn.
mhm,
The future is more just things that you're necessarily projecting, or it hasn't happened yet. And
mhm,
so a lot of times, when you focus on the future, you're in some ways, um you're kind of guessing, and you're not necessarily thinking rational, but you're
Mm-hmm.
predicting things that have not happened yet that actually affect the present. When you go
Yep.
into the past, you're basically reconnecting or you're revisiting
Mm-hmm.
experiences that you can no longer experience anymore, that they're done with. You can correct or prevent things from happening again, but you can't go back and change the past. So one of
Right.
the biggest ways that you can alleviate depression is if you focus on how to you presently, as that
Yep.
person talked about, you're presently focusing on yourself, and you presently focus on right now how I can live a better life, or elite, or somewhat avoid things that create that depression. So you're
Yeah.
you're more in turns focusing on me presently focusing and dealing with those things, as opposed to all of my psychological energy and abilities going to things that I can't change, and also
Mm-hmm.
the things that I don't know if they're going to happen or not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it makes more sense to focus on the present. Yeah, we talk about that in terms, particularly when I was in school, that was more of a the here and now perspective,
Yeah. That is
a
awesome.
model, as far as you focusing on the present, and that's utilized a lot to help people be grounded more into what they're currently dealing with, instead of focusing and exerting so much of your mental faculties on
Mm-hmm.
things that you really can't change
You
and don't
can't
know.
control. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's
Mhm.
what he kind of harped on me on that, because he said I was stuck in either or instead of the here and now. So
Yes.
I'm glad that that's a principle that you guys share in your field, that it's the
Yes.
here and now, and that's what he used for me, because it really did work. It helped me, man. All right, so we only got like two more things to cover, and then
Sure. Take your
I don't
time.
know if you want me to open it up so people could come ask us questions, or talk to us,
I,
or
I'm fine with people asking me questions related to the topic and the topic.
right.
I don't want to
And
get
the
into
topic alone,
any,
it's not gonna get nothing crazy. We
yeah,
can't do
nothing
that.
crazy sector related stuff.
Yeah, none of
But
that.
I
None of
am
that.
fine with it being on topic.
Yeah, and you know what? No, we won't drop the link. We'll look into the chat. We'll look into
Okay,
the
sure.
chat, and we'll go that way, because I don't want anything to disrupt this. I love the flow of it, and I want this to happen more often. I don't want it to
Sure.
get messy. All right,
Okay.
so I spoke a little bit about this right here. I know it's a little funky concept, but if you type it into Google, it will pop up, and it probably will be the Forbes magazine where I got it from. The privacy calculus effect. Okay. According to the privacy calculus effect, individuals weigh the potential privacy risk against the anticipated benefits or rewards while deciding whether to disclose the information, such as preferences, behaviors, or sensitive data, to others. Talking about oneself is also intrinsically rewarding, as it activates the brain's regions associated with reward, and the popularity of social media has furthered the ability to share personal experiences. Gaining social validation through the likes and comments can be a powerful motivator, affirming the human's need for connection and approval. So this is the checks and balances. This is the weighing. So what goes through your mind when you hear the privacy calculus effect, where you weigh the negative and positive impacts of disclosing very, very private and sensitive information?
I think that when I hear this particular term, which is something I never heard before prior to today, and I think I may have to do further research on it.
Hmm.
But as far as the behavior and the description of it is very relative to any content creator that's on any platform,
Hmm.
because when you're sharing certain things or sensitive information, I think it is important that you weigh the positive and the negatives of you deciding to present that information, and also deal
Hmm.
with the consequences of that. And
Yeah.
I think, and many times, most people, um, they don't necessarily weigh those options properly. They focus more on the positive and getting, whether it's for shock value
That's
or
right.
you
That's
can
right.
emotionally connect to that person. They're focused more on the positives, and in many ways they're somewhat surprised or shocked at the negative comments that do occur. And
Yeah.
that's usually what the main complaint is when people give those negative responses, or things that they did not consider, and
Yep.
it can trigger more issues with you, with one. So I would encourage those that within the framework of the privacy calculus effect,
Hmm.
you focus more on all I would say options that you have, but also the probability of any occurrence, positive or negative, and how you may deal with it. If you can produce pros and cons
Hmm.
of what you're going to say, can you deal with the cons? Can you know?
Right.
It's easy to accept the pros
Hmm.
and the validation and this inspirational, and people connect to you based on these things. But
Yeah.
can you handle the fact that someone may call you a predator, someone may
Hmm.
slander your name, someone may act like they known you and call you all types of names
Right.
that's not necessarily representative of who you truly are, but because you said this one thing, um, they will, in my position, hold on to that as far
Yeah.
as that label. So it's up to you as a person to determine what you want to share, but also within what you share, how are you going to handle the positives and the negatives that come out
Yeah.
of it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said, Diderot. Well said. And the reason why I definitely want to bring this topic up and put this out into the YouTube world is because I didn't have this information when I first started. and if and if
Okay.
somebody is looking to start their channel and they're looking to be kind of like do what we do or even enter into our sectors, because our sectors, although they're fun, they can get crazy. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, they definitely
It-
can get crazy. Definitely.
so I just want them to know kind of what not to do because I still regret, oversharing and doing all that. And I didn't have the privacy calculus effect in my brain. Like I didn't have all that. I didn't weigh the options, especially when I started to spew out all the stuff that I was spewing out, oversharing. I was in that zone of everybody was liking me. You know what I mean? Like, oh,
Right.
I'm well liked. Everything's well
And
received.
and
I
they're
can
going to
do no
overlook
wrong. Go
this.
ahead.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to overlook things, but not
Yep.
necessarily factoring in that they may have or know someone that experienced that, and
There it
it's
is.
unresolved, and it can trigger a certain response.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I didn't calculate. I did not consider that. You know what I mean? That's why I say that, I am ashamed and embarrassed of what I did because I see the grave errors in my ways. When you
Right,
could
right,
see
right.
that you truly messed up, it's like, dang. And then, like you said, it's like either get off of YouTube or deal with the consequences. And I'm too addicted to get off of YouTube. So I'm just gonna have to deal. I'm
I
just gonna have
understand. YouTube is quite addictive. I get
to
that.
have to deal with this. Now, I saved this topic for last because I know you could probably go on forever. I got about four paragraphs, not paragraphs, just like
Just
four
go
long
ahead. Just
sentences that
sure,
I that
no
I that
problem.
I got that I want to read off. That I did get from the Forbes magazine, but here it is. It's is it showing navigating mental distress. I know this is your wheelhouse right here, brother.
Okay.
So research shows that oversharing online is linked to anxiety. Somebody said this in the chat, attention seeking and social media addiction, and I just admitted that. Individuals often turn to social media to cope with feelings of loneliness and make friends online when they are struggling with real world connections. I have three more to go through, but I want to go one by one with you. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Um, I would say anxiety can be one of the many things, but I also think that there are other mental health issues that also contribute to that, not just
Mhm.
limited to anxiety. I do agree with that.
Mhm.
But it's not just anxiety related. It can be mood related altogether. It could be depressive
Mhm.
related. It can be psychosis related.
Yeah.
It could be behavioral related, impulse
Yeah.
related.
Yep.
So that there's a ton of it could be stress related. I mean, there are tons of people who come
Absolutely.
online that struggle with PTSD and other stress related, impulse related issues that they come out and they may abruptly talk about those things. So
Mhm.
I do agree with it, but I would have actually added not just relative to anxiety, but also other mental health related features also.
Right. So what do you think when they say, while this can often be genuine as a genuine source talking about social media of support in a space to be heard if one is feeling marginalized or ignored, oversharing online can also create a false sense of closeness with a large audience. fostering a belief in meaningful connections that may in reality be superficial. And you hit on that already a little bit,
Yeah,
but now they're like
exactly.
really just throwing that out there and putting the
Right.
spotlight on it.
Right. Yeah, because because the reality is that it is a indirect relationship. It's not a direct relationship. You're basically on a platform that gives a certain level of realism
Hmm.
that is not necessarily truly totally real, but it does give a heightened sense of that, and it also
Yeah.
gives a heightened sense of visibility and social connectivity with one
Yeah.
another. And so
Hmm.
you can bond and connect and feel what other people are saying and the relatability of of way they present themselves. That is something that you can definitely gravitate to. But
Hmm.
all in reality is that we have to understand is that you never met this person, you don't know this person,
There it is.
you don't have the direct contact that really human beings are basically
That we
bred
need.
that's
Yep.
within us to have that more direct contact with one another. So I definitely get what they're saying with that. And I wholeheartedly concur with what they're saying.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna put the banner back up just so the audience can not well, so that they remember what we're talking about. Because what I'm going to read now, I was accused of, and when I was accused of it, of course I kind of brushed it off. But then I sat back and I thought about it, and it kind of messed me up a little bit. So remember, we're talking about navigating mental illness, okay? And they said another psychological factor contributing to oversharing is narcissism. Ugh. Individuals with narcissistic tendencies may feel an insatiable desire for attention and admiration and to seek to fulfill it by sharing personal achievements, experiences, or even hardships on a public platform. Goodness, bro. That kind of
Uh,
messed me up, man.
okay, so before I answer that, and
Mhm.
because of the controversy around particularly and the misusage of narcissism, I'm
Mhm.
going to have to ask you what source did that come from?
Well, it came from our good brother Chat Lives Matter. He accused me of being a
Okay,
narcissist.
so I'm gonna just leave that at that. That has no legitimacy. Even though a person with narcissistic personality disorder, they are driven um by in many ways manipulating others to think that they are greater than what they really are,
Yeah.
or and so on. And there's a lot of deceptiveness towards that. The average narcissist is not getting on YouTube or social media to do that,
Mm.
and that's just the reality of it. And so um, and I just had this conversation again with a professional earlier today. They asked me, so how many people with narcissism have you treated in your career? I said, I may have treated two, maybe three.
Mm.
I know definitely one about, and they all were in, I think two of them were in a state hospital, in a hospital
Mhm.
setting. Maybe one that I may have encountered in a community related environment. And so that term is thrown around too loosely.
Yeah.
And the fact that yeah, narcissists do um seek validation. They want you to believe the lie that they want to present to you as it
Mhm.
involves themselves, and they're willing to go above and beyond to convince you that they are as great as they think they are, and so
Mm.
on. And then they do that, but that's only one symptom of narcissism. There's nine symptoms of narcissism
Oh
that
wow.
people we focus on a lot. And also I want to preface, as it involves narcissism, just because someone did something you didn't like and you found selfish or it hurt you, doesn't mean that that was grounded in narcissism. It could be grounded in
Mm.
the fact that they just made a mistake. It could be grounded in the fact that they are finding their way through how to function in a relationship. It's made a bad decision.
Wow.
Doesn't necessarily
Wow.
mean you're a narcissist, but I do think that there isn't. I wanted to make sure I asked that because
Mhm.
there's so much miseducation on YouTube as it involves that particular illness. I could actually talk for days about the
Yeah.
miseducation of narcissism. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to give you my
No,
perspective
no,
on that.
I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
appreciate that because I did hold the term too loosely. Like I didn't do a deep study on narcissism because I thought I knew what it was. But now that you tell me there are 9,
Yeah, the
pretty
9
much,
features
oh
that
my
that,
gosh.
that 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 make up narcissism,
Yeah.
and you have to have at least 5 of the 9. I want to say about
Okay.
5 of the 9, as far as from the the
DSM.
the the DSM-5
Hmm.
or TR the DSM-5 criteria. You have to
Hmm.
have it. You have to have a majority of the 9 in order to
Okay.
classify.
Yeah.
So
See, that's deep.
and also, as it relates to having 5 of those symptoms, they have to be operating concurrently with one another.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
a person has to possess this throughout the day of interacting with people, not just one particular symptom. And we have to, and we can't just ignore the other 9, the other 8
Right. The other
that
8 that's
exist if we
going on.
just focus
Yeah.
on that one symptom.
Wow.
Unfortunately, when people say stuff like a person is a malignant narcissist, they're
Hmm.
introverted, no, they're extroverted. I'm like all of these different terms that about, and I'm like, it's that they're decorating the illness in a way that goes outside of what it
The
was
scope and
intended.
range of what it was. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, and I
yes,
and I man, I just thank you for that, man, because I love conversations like this that push me forward to learn more. You know what I mean? And
right, right.
I want to go learn about it because I guess I was getting narcissism mixed up with like egocentrism, like just being totally into myself. And I guess it's broader, it's bigger than that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a overused word, kind of like gaslighting. Everybody thinks that everybody's gaslighting this and gaslighting that, and that word is
And
being
I
so
also want to
overused.
preface the
Mhm.
term gaslighting really comes from issues that happen within like domestic violence, as it involves someone who um, in which the victim in turn will communicate this is what you're doing, and they pretend that they're not doing it so they can
Mhm.
continue the abuse.
Yeah.
It has been stretched into all different type of areas, and it's like just because you don't agree with just because you're in agreement how something occurred, like if you
Mhm.
thought if you said somebody went left and you remember that you said right, doesn't mean that you're gaslighting that you said left. It just remember you don't remember
You
you
just don't
just thought,
remember.
and because you don't agree on a scenario does not mean you're gaslighting.
Mhm.
Gaslighting is something that is evident that did occur. You can prove it occurred. They know it occurred, but you refuse to admit that it happened or that it occurred. It's factual. It's factual that you did something and then you act like you didn't do it. It has to be factual, not based on interpretation.
Right. I like that. I like that. So here's the
Mhm.
last little sentence that we'll read through. You could talk about, and then we'll just wrap this up, man.
Sure, sure.
And like I said, I really do appreciate you coming here, bro.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
love I
Anytime.
love I love when we speak like this, man. It's awesome. So they say despite meeting immediate psychological needs, constant validation seeking through oversharing may lead to a cycle of dependency on external affirmations. So
Okay.
cultivating and yeah, yep, So cultivating intrinsic self-worth and resilience can help you avoid relying solely on external validations, which is often fleeting and unpredictable.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So as it involves that, we don't want to um, create codependency for emotional validation or emotional connectivity, or bonding with one, or develop any type of cohesiveness with anyone that you work with or particularly do content with online. It can become a codependent relationship in which one person is codependent on how to function. They're dependent on others in regards to allowing that to into something function or occurring. And
Hmm.
so it doesn't it's not there's nothing wrong with seeking, and or not necessarily seeking, but wanting validation from others. That
Okay.
is a human trait
Hmm.
that all
Hmm.
human beings seek some level of value or want validation from others.
Right.
That we can't avoid that. The problem is the means in which you depend on it,
Yep. And
and the
oversharing
avenues that
shouldn't
you,
be one of them. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the means that you go about to seek it, and also um when it's given, how do you handle it.
Mm,
So everybody wants other people to think of them in a positive manner above
right.
being negative. Again, it's all about Are you driven by that? It is
Mm,
what somebody thinks of you means more than what you think about yourself. And
mm,
so, with that being said, and just in summary, um, seeking that validation is to me somewhat subject to a lack of positive self-image or lack of positive or self-esteem. So
mm-hmm.
your esteem issues in regards to oneself may not be as such. So you're seeking it from others to replace that or compensate for your lack thereof.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I don't think we're gonna take questions, man. This was a
You sure?
smooth show.
Okay.
Uh, uh, I just
I just
don't
want.
want to. I just don't want it to mess up what we have because this is.
Hey,
You know what? No, let's do it.
I'm
No,
great,
let's do it.
man.
No,
I'm
let's do
fine.
it. It was a smooth. It was a smooth show, Derell. But let's do it. Why not? Why not? All right. If you guys have any questions in the chat, please go ahead and type them now. What I'll do is I'm gonna play our no, I'm gonna play our intro as an outro, so I'm not gonna do that. D
Okay.
Darrell, man, this show was bananas, bro. It was
Appreciate
off
it.
the hook,
Appreciate it.
man. It was off the hook. And like I said, I will always seek you out, and if you like the topic, we can do this again. You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean? If not,
Most
please
definitely.
feel free to be like, nah, man, I ain't really trying to speak on that. You know what I mean?
Okay. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm looking to see if anybody's going to ask us anything. This is a topic that I could talk about for hours. I'm loving the connection. Yeah. Yeah. We can be here for hours, but we don't want to overdo it because we want to keep coming back. You know what I mean? People are putting
Right.
fire emojis. I think they're kind of like me right now. They just love what we just did and they don't
Sure.
want to, they don't want to. I'm not saying their questions are going to water it down, but it
Okay.
was just dope. It was nice and concise what we did. Okay. Hold on. Hold on. Oh dang, have this show 3 times a week.
Well, that's a bit
No, we can't
much, but
be doing
okay.
that. All right, they're saying phenomenal live. D Darrell, once again, thank you so much, brother, for being
Okay.
here and for doing this, man. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for linking up. You know what I mean? We made our
Yeah.
transition. You know what I mean? We're doing what we're doing, and
No problem.
some people like it, some people don't. Oh, here's a question. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. It says, aren't there other reasons for depression as well as what you mentioned earlier? Oh yeah, there's tons of reasons for
Yeah,
depression. Go
that's
ahead.
all different types. That could be hereditary, it could be environmental, it could be health related, it can be trauma related. That's all different. It could be nutrition related as far as
Hmm.
depression. Depression can come about in a multitude of different ways.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm not. I would share where mine came from, but that's oversharing, so I can't do it. I learned a lesson today. You see what I'm
Yeah, I don't think it's good to do that. I don't think that's a problem. That'd be we don't need to know that. That's between you and your therapist or your wife or whomever you
saying?
disclose that information to.
Facts. All right,
Yeah.
Darrell, have a great night, man. I'll be
All
seeing
right.
you on these YouTube streets, buddy.
All right, man. You
Appreciate
have a
you.
great day. Appreciate you
Okay.
all for coming in. Peace.
Uh huh. Peace.
Bye bye.
Heard I say, hey, to earn respect is what you earn, and trust is something you gain when loyalty is returned.